delight. I've known Rebecca for a number of years now. I think we met, I had heard that she had been fighting against the teachers' unions. There was, in fact, a case, Friedrichs versus California Teachers Association, that went as far as the Supreme Court. It was argued before the Supreme Court, including Justice Scalia. And then we know what happened with Justice Scalia. So that suit, I think it came back a tie. And then the Janus decision followed in the footsteps of Rebecca's suit. I'm sure she'll tell us more about that. But I first became familiar with Rebecca's work when she was fighting that fight, but also more specifically against the unbelievably sexual in nature indoctrination in our schools for elementary kids. Just unbelievable. Now we hear about it a little bit more, but at the time it was a new thing, and it was just a horror. And she was speaking out for kids, for parental rights before anybody else was really talking about it. And your book wasn't even out yet. So since that time, we've been following her. I've spoken with her at various events, but she's all over the country. She also spoke at the 2020 Republican National Convention. Absolutely spectacular. What she has done, and I think the name of her organization, For Kids and Country, is a reminder of many here are not parents, right? As I gather. Nevertheless, you recognize the importance of our children in the success of our country, in the continuation of prosperity of Western civilization, of Judeo-Christian values. It's our country that's being destroyed using our children as the vehicle. So whether or not we have kids, it's really our country and Western civilization that's under attack. And what Rebecca does, again, with the title For Kids and Country, that's what it is. Whether or not we have kids, even so, we recognize the relevance of children to the continuation of all that we believe. So please welcome my great friend, and it's such an honor to call her that. Please welcome Rebecca Friedrichs.
What an honor to be here again. What an honor. I wish I could come to every event that you all have. I'm going to start with a video.
We heard these heartbreaking stories from around the state of kids falling behind. We all knew this was going to happen, but the reality is the National Teachers Union is more concerned with politics, they're more concerned with power than they are our kids.
99.99% of teachers union donations go to Democrats, and they regularly advocate for policies that have absolutely nothing to do with education, from things like abortion on demand to Medicare for all, things like supporting Palestine, things that have nothing to do with educating our children.
Well, unfortunately, I think the only way to read it as the union trying to politicize the pandemic.
The union said it would not bless school reopening until they defunded the police.
We've seen the devastating effect that lockdowns and school shutdowns have had on our kids' education. And I can't help but reach the conclusion that we have teachers unions who are holding our kids hostage.
It's not just academic loss. Mental health problems are also on the rise.
This disproportionately hurt disadvantaged students. So the same people, equity warriors who have been screaming DEI from the rooftops for 2 years, are the same ones that have disproportionately hurt those students.
In the name of sexuality education, children are seeing obscene materials.
I've seen some of the lesson plans that are in play here, and regardless of where you stand politically, I think some of them are quite shocking.
This is pornography. I do not approve of this. My daughter does not need to see cartoon pornography.
I got people who are on drugs, and she 5 times was fired, and I got her job back 5 times. Listen, if you hit the kid, you hit the kid. It is what it is. You go to the Hamilton Board of Education and report this, they're gonna call the police, and they're gonna call parents and all that. We don't do that. We don't do that here. I'm here to defend even the worst people.
There is absolutely a climate of hostility if you speak up against the union.
I was accused of not being fit for teaching. I was accused of hurting a student. I was accused of not being a quality leader, all because I was opposed to being forced to be a union member.
You're ostracized, you could lose friends who are colleagues.
No government employee, including teachers, has to fund a union anymore. But most of them have no idea. So the reason I wanted to show you that first is, and the reason I'm so glad that I had the great opportunity of going last today, is that every single evil thing that is going on in our schools and our country has its root in the so-called teacher unions. So yeah, thank you. I love talking to groups who get it. So I was a teacher for 28 years. I would still be in the classroom if it wasn't for the corruption. I felt God called me out to be the teacher to America, to say, hey, whoa, stop giving money to these unions. And thank God teachers are finally awakening. When I was teaching, I was the only teacher in my district who had a problem with the unions, and I was forced to fund them at that time as a condition of employment, but I had a problem with them. The other day I was talking to a school board member who told me they've had 100 teachers leave the union in their district. It's huge, it's huge. So the message I want to help you understand today, twofold. They are not teachers and they are not a union. I call them the education cartel. Please join me we can't give them the messaging. We can't let them use us anymore. They've been exploiting me and other teachers for decades. Since the 70s, we were forced to pay them, and claim they represent teachers. They don't. Claim they're a union. They're not. They're an education cartel. And so I'm going to make a bunch of accusations, and you've heard a bunch of accusations today, and then I'm going to show you a slideshow that's just going to give you a little bit of evidence. If I had 5 weeks to talk to you, I'd really dig in. But I only have 30 minutes, so I'm just going to give you some highlights. So I'm just going to tell you a few stories. So first of all, and by the way, as a kindergarten teacher, I'm used to exploding and running all over the place, so it's hard for me to stand behind a podium. So maybe I'll keep you awake, right? Anyway, so I have some teacher friends who still, to this day, they're retired, they still spend their own money to go to the annual National Education Association meeting. They're all over the country, never in a red state. And my friends go, pay for their airfare, stay in a hotel and everything, just to stand up for you and the kids. They've been pushing against the sex ed for decades. Okay, it didn't just launch onto the scene all of a sudden. Yeah, thank you for clapping for them, they're amazing. But they've been pushing back on the unions for decades, just on the sex ed. Do you know what happens to them when they do that? This happens every year. It's always July, it's always the week of July 4th. Of course, they have to have their meeting on Independence Day, and there's nothing independent about them. They're tyrants. These teachers, for sticking up for the kids, have been spit upon by union members. They have been barred from serving on health committees, so they can't make a difference. When they go up on the podium and speak to 10,000 quote teachers from around the country, they are booed off the platform. When they walk back to their seats, a big thug will stand in their way and make sure they can't get to their seats. That's how real teachers are treated by so-called teacher union. And as your teacher today, I'm going to continue to remind you, they are really the education cartel. At some point, I might ask you to repeat that, so put that in your brain there. Education cartel. So I used to call them the education mafia, and an immigrant friend of mine who fled the Soviet Union told me, Rebecca, the mafia actually likes America. And I thought to myself, he's right. So I changed it to cartel, education cartel. You got a better name for me? Let me know after the show. So they use mafia tactics, cartel tactics to terrorize teachers. They've been doing this for decades. I mentioned teachers were forced to pay them as a condition of employment. We sued them. The Janus case came after us. Now, no teacher or government employee has to fund a union. However, as I told you in the video, most of them have no idea. So I'm a teacher. I have this really bad habit. I give homework. So you're all getting homework today. Aren't you happy about that? Not making you write an essay or anything like that. I'm just going to ask you to do something I call liberate teachers. Help us liberate teachers. Mary told you a little bit about it. I don't work with California Policy Center. We just, agree the teachers need to get the heck out of the unions. So I'm just going to go over just some highlights of some of the things that the so-called teacher unions are behind so you can understand. They're at fault for everything every speaker mentioned to you today, but I'm just going to mention a few more, and then I'm going to give you some evidence on a slideshow. The radical sex ed, triple X. Did you know that, first of all, if you have a real teacher like myself or my husband in front of the classroom, they would never teach this evil to your children. But did you know that Planned Parenthood has contracts with districts all over the country? Not just California, all over the country, even in Texas. And they'll sexualize your children every day. And so your child might have a real teacher or might have an activist. So the unions don't bring in real teachers, they bring in activists. So when you see that crazy lady that we were shown earlier, a crazy teacher who, I'm trans, so all my students are trans, thank God she got fired. Usually they're the ones that get protected by the unions because the unions have hand-selected them. Oh, you're a tranny? Come be a teacher. I knew I was going to be a teacher when I was 12 years old. Okay, no union selected me. I was a real teacher. These are activists. So all the things I'm telling you are done by activists, not by real teachers. It's really important that people start to, don't say anymore, a teacher did this, a teacher did that, because you're throwing every good teacher under the bus. Not meaning to, but that's what's happening. So that's why we have to say it was the union, the education cartel, who did that with an activist, not a real teacher. So radical sex, if you have an activist, quote, teacher in your classroom, your children will be told to have anal sex so that they won't get pregnant. Okay, I know a lot of you in this audience are Jewish or you're Christians. That's a total abomination to our God. How dare they attack our religious faith in a public school, government school. These drag queen story hours, all that stuff, the unions are 100% behind it. Did you know librarians are unionized? Yeah, it's the union bringing it in. The condom relay race, if you've heard of that one. Oh yeah, the men always love this. So, they don't love it. It makes them angry, makes them want to fight. So if you have an activist, quote, teacher running your classroom who's using the Planned Parenthood curricula or the other 6 curricula that are approved in the state of California, they might teach a lesson called the condom relay race. And this could happen as early as 4th, 5th grade. Teacher is told, line the kids up in 2 teams, and by the way, boys and girls together, because you're not allowed to assume anybody's gender anymore. So everybody's together, line them up. You know how a relay race works, right? Teachers told, I read this in the Planned Parenthood teacher manual in 2012. That's how long ago I saw it. This is going on. Teachers told, put a table in front of the room. On that table, put out 2, pardon me, I'm sorry, anatomically correct, fully erect, you-know-whats on the table. And the kids now are supposed to use condoms and have a relay race. Who can get the condoms on there fast and then which team can win? And the teacher is told, make it a fun activity. How can you make child abuse fun? It's child abuse. It's unbelievable. This is happening thanks to one specific organization, the education cartel, the so-called teacher unions. And they have opened the door to hundreds and hundreds of special interest groups like Planned Parenthood and Southern Poverty Law Center and ACLU who have infiltrated our schools. And by the way, I'll get into this a little later, the so-called unions, they're communists. They've always been communists. They've never hidden it. They hid it from teachers. But if you dig through their primary documents from 1857 when they were first started, they're communists. And that's what they're trying to do to our schools. They're trying to destroy our constitutional free republic and flip us to be a communist country. Do you feel it? Yeah, it's getting really obvious. Gender spectrum. Your child might be in preschool, and the activist union cartel member will say, when you were born, your parents didn't know your gender. You can pick your gender from an unlimited number of genders, and you can change your gender every day. So this is a social contagion that we have all these transgender kids. We really don't have transgender kids. It's a lie. They're being propagandized day and night. I mean, it's a constant drone of LGBT propaganda, which is communist propaganda. Communists always sexualize the children, divide the family, dumb everybody down so the tyrants can take over. That's what they always do. It's communism. Boys dominating girls' sports, that's the fault of the education cartel too. I'll show you some evidence in the slideshow. Guess who they passed that with? The PTA. Somebody mentioned Mike Pompeo earlier. I heard him speak. I love him. I heard him speak, but he said, oh, you should join the PTA. No. The PTA was taken over by the unions in the 1960s. They are corrupt as can be and run by the unions. I was a PTA mom. I was a PTA teacher. I didn't know. I paid a lot of money to the PTA, and they used it to propagandize the kids. But I'm awake now. Gay Straight Alliance and other clubs on campus, they're all started by activists. Student clubs are supposed to be started by students, and then they go get a faculty advisor, right? No, not in our world. Union activists start these clubs, and they use the clubs to transgender the kids. It's unbelievable. And it's happening. Lying to parents, pushing policies that take away the rights of parents, and all those things, all pushed by the unions. Have you heard of 988 hotlines? 988 hotlines were supposed to be a good thing, started under the Trump administration. I wish I would have been there to say, anytime you start anything in a government agency, the unions are going to destroy it. So the 988 hotline was supposed to help people who have suicidal tendencies. Have you noticed there's more of that nowadays since the unions took over? Those hotlines direct children directly to Trevor Space, where they are connected to perverts online. And the poster child for Trevor Space is that Sam Brinton guy who steals women's luggage. Okay, this is who our kids are being led to for supposed help. We have racial equity discipline policies that have turned our classrooms into war zones. That was all written and passed by the government unions and Obama. They did that through the Obama administration. Now we have all these school shootings and we wonder why. It's because we have no discipline anymore. The unions started Black Lives Matter. They bragged about it on a magazine they forced on me. And now they've pushed community schools. Have you heard of those? They're all over LA. Our governor signed a new education bill a year or two ago. It's loaded with billions for community schools. What's a community school? It's a communist model where the child comes to school, gets everybody. I don't care if your parents are Bill Gates and you're super rich. Everyone's on free breakfast, free lunch. Everyone gets free health care, free everything. And the teachers, who are just these kind people, oh, isn't that wonderful, we're taking care of Johnny. No, we're undermining Johnny's family. We're taking over the family. And by the way, they tell the parents how to vote and all that stuff too. So the education cartel is anti-American, anti-family, anti-education, anti-child, anti-military, anti-police. You name whatever's good, they're anti that. And I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian, and I was trapped in that union long enough that I will tell you it is run by people that I believe are demonic, are under the power of demonic powers. That's how wicked it is. Who else would harm children the way they do? They're behind, I heard someone talking about safe spaces. Now the unions are behind that. Fake science, fake history. And you know that bill they passed a few years ago, AB 2223, where you can now murder a baby at 30 days after it's born? Yes. The unions put every single legislator in office who passed that bill. So the unions did it. It's their fault. They're murdering babies, and police aren't even allowed to investigate what happened to the police union. Why didn't they step in? Open borders, abolishing ICE, defunding police, all of that is the unions. And I could go on for days, but my time's limited. So speaking of defunding police, unions, they're always talking about the school to prison pipeline. Have you heard that line? Oh, we have to help our kids so they don't go right out of school and into prison. Well, the unions have caused the school to prison pipeline. They did it. You look back in the 50s, let's just take look at a picture of teenage black young men in the 50s. They're wearing suits, collared shirts, some of them ties. They looked great. Now a lot of them have their underwear hanging out, or they're in jail. The unions did that to the black community while claiming they're the defenders of the black community. What are they? They're liars. They're liars. And they've done this to community after community after community. So this school to prison pipeline, I want to talk a little bit about this. Claiming, you know, that they're keeping young men out of prison. What they've actually done, they're sending our young men to prison. How do they do this? Well, it's all with their policies. So one of the first things they did in the 1930s, believe it or not, they started removing phonics instruction from our schools. You might not realize the importance of phonics because maybe you got Dick and Jane and you don't realize Dick and Jane is educational quackery. It's not learning how to read, it's memorizing some words. But phonics is you learn how to sound out the sound of the letter, blend those letters together and make a word. So when I taught kindergarten, I could teach a child how to read in a couple of months. No problem. And then they just improved and improved. And, you know, a year and a half into phonics instruction, true phonics instruction with no sight words and all this other nonsense, a child could pick up the newspaper and read it no problem. They might not comprehend all the big words, but they could sound them out phonetically. So phonics, there's 3,500 years of historical evidence that phonics is the only way to teach children an alphabetic language like English. But the unions knew better, and they removed it. And so now we have literally millions of functional illiterates in our country, and that's one of the problems that's sending our boys to prison. They're illiterate, or functionally illiterate, where you really can't survive in life. You can't read well enough. What else did they push? And I might start to really rub people the wrong way, but I'm just going to tell the truth. They push self-esteem. Okay, I fell for it. When I was in teacher college, I fell for the self-esteem thing. It's the biggest, fattest lie. God tells us to have self-control, not self-esteem, not, oh, you're so wonderful and the world revolves around you. Look what it's turned, a bunch of kids are a mess, right? Well, it was the unions that pushed the self-esteem on us. So why would they do that? And then also, did you notice that women were used, they didn't know they were being used, to emasculate men? Did you notice that? Look, when I met my husband, he was a professor at San Diego State for years, and when we first met, our first date at Spaghettini, or no, that was our second date. Anyway, whatever it was, he didn't open the door for me, and I went, whoa, my dad told me never date a guy again if he doesn't open the door for you. And he goes, I go, I'm waiting for you to open the door. So we sit down at the restaurant, and he goes, tell me about this. And I said, well, my dad told me not to date you anymore if you don't open the door for me. What's going on? Why didn't you open the door? He goes, oh, I am so sorry. Women have been beating me down for years for opening the door. If I open it, they scream at me. This woman wants the door open every time. Yeah. So we just have to keep working on it, right? Because the men want to open the door for us. They're our heroes. They want to. Yeah. So that's what the men want. What do communists want? They want our men to be weak. They want our women to think we're powerful and more powerful than the men, and they want us to divide. Critical race theory, if I was going to explain it, is divide and conquer. Find out whatever you can use to divide people, race, class, sex, and divide them. And that's what the unions are experts at, is divide and conquer. So what did they do to our boys? Number one, they put them into these schools that are designed for girls and said little boys need to sit all day with their hands folded for 7 hours a day and not do anything even somewhat interesting. And when the boys failed at that, what did they do? Here's where I might rub people the wrong way. They labeled them deficit and disorder. Our boys aren't deficit and disorder. They're amazing. They are, you know, made by God. They're weaved in the womb of their mother, and they're supposed to be powerful. They're supposed to be hyperactive. They're supposed to be strong. If you went back to an Indian tribe, the guy we'd label ADHD now and put him on speed was the chief, right? Yeah. So that's what they did to our boys. I have a whole chapter on that in my book because I have a boy they labeled ADHD. And I want to brag to you, my boy they labeled ADHD, who does not take drugs, works for SpaceX. That boy, he builds Starship. You watch Starship? My son welded it. It's pretty cool. He can weld for 12 hours a day, but he's ADHD? Give me a break. No, he was bored learning about metaphors for the 27th time. That's what it was. He was bored. All right, so I'm going to run out of time if I keep droning on and on. So they also gave our boys like all these other labels. Like if they're geniuses, we call them Asperger's, right? If they're like really good at leadership and they're confident, we say they're a bully. Well, we have to stand against that. We need our men, we need our boys. We need our boys to be masculine again and our men to be masculine again. Please, men, be masculine. Please. And I always tell women, do you know why we like Little House on the Prairie? Because Charles Ingalls, every time some jerk does some bad thing, Charles Ingalls gives him justice. Just like that, right? Punches him in the face. I love it. We need some of that. We need some of it. Okay, so with the communist indoctrination, what have they done? They've replaced self-control with self-esteem. They've replaced virtue with virtue signaling. Think of the difference of those two. They've replaced patriotism with hatred, and they have replaced servants' hearts with entitlement. That's destructive, very destructive to our culture. So they've also done things like bringing the Common Core and all that nonsense. I want to read one quote to you, because I know y'all love Dennis Prager, and so do I. Dennis Prager also fell for the self-esteem. And he thought, oh yeah, this is great, just like all of us, because, you know, propagandists are very clever. They get us to believe them with clever words. So Dennis Prager ran into the same person I ran into, a psychologist named John Rosemond. He's amazing. He's out of the East. The left hates him because he believes in old-fashioned parenting, like discipline and chores and those kinds of things. He helped me turn my son around, John Rosemond. So Dennis Prager, once he read John Rosemond, he said this: there is no correlation between goodness and high self-esteem, but there is a correlation between criminality and high self-esteem. Shocking, and I'll show you some evidence on the slideshow. So we can start the slideshow now. Let's see if I get it right. I'm not very good at all this. I'm good at making them, but I'm not good at running them. So you saw in the video, this is my favorite quote, because I want to help people to understand, if we keep fighting up in the branches, I mean, we need to fight. We need to fight school board. We need to fight the sex ed. We need to fight all this radical nonsense. But we can be up there forever and never win unless we dig out the root. What's the root causing all these wicked branches to grow? It's the so-called unions. It's the cartel, education cartel. We have to take the unions out. Teachers are finally waking up. We need to help them get out. And eventually, my whole thing is let's make unions illegal again. That would be my dream. Okay, so just a little bit of evidence. I promised you evidence. So the coalition of supporters behind the radical sex ed in this state, check out the coalition of supporters. California School Board Association, those are the ones that called y'all domestic terrorists. The California Teachers Association, and the PTA. PTA. Why would the PTA be behind radical XXX sex ed and the condom relay races and transgendering kids? Because the PTA is not who they claim to be. They're not the PTA anymore. They're the cartel. Okay, this is from the California Teacher Association website. I know it's hard for you to see, but you can look it up yourself. I just want you to see. It's dated October 2013. And the part I put in a red box is the unions and the PTA bragging that they were behind the first ever transgender law here in California, allowing boys to dominate girls' sports, girls' locker rooms, and girls' bathrooms. The union and the PTA did that, claiming they're for kids. They teach all this fake science, like there's more than two genders and all that kind. You know, you ever wonder why God said so many times, I made them male and female? Because he knew this day was coming, right? And we'd need we need it clear. It's male and female. So what do the unions do? How do they push their fake global warming and all their fake science? Well, they rewrote the scientific method. So see the part I highlighted in yellow for you? The unions struck out those words from the scientific method. So they struck out empirical evidence, valid scientific experimentation. In other words, the whole scientific method. They struck out, you know, you come up with a hypothesis and you test it over and over, and if you can get empirical evidence, well then it's a good hypothesis. If you don't, you start all over, right? It's a lousy hypothesis. They threw all that out. They changed it for the underlined part that I highlighted for you in green. The basics of that underlined part is consensus. Whose consensus? The consensus of the left. If you agree with the left and their fake science, you get the money. You get your name out there and everything else. If you tell the truth, well, nobody hears from you. I told you that they're for abolishing ICE and defunding police. This is just a picture from a union protest, NEA meeting in 2018 in Minneapolis. They closed down all the streets. They don't pay for the police that have to do all that. You and I do. And look at them. They're brandishing signs, abolish ICE, and teaching little girls to flip off the President of the United States. I'd argue the best president we've ever had since George Washington. And Abe Lincoln. But look at that girl. She should have her midriff covered and she should be respecting the office whether she liked that president or not. Lots of presidents I didn't like while I was teaching. Nobody knew that. Okay, the high self-esteem. Check this out. So this Florida State professor, educated at Princeton, he revealed after a lifetime of studying violent criminals that the one characteristic nearly all of them shared was high self-esteem. High self-esteem is not good for us. High humility is good for us. Integrity, self-control, virtue, but not high self-esteem. Okay, I told you about the PTA. So this was a union leader many years ago, said the PTA has credibility. That is why we always use the PTA as a front. It's a front organization. The so-called teacher unions, they're a front organization. They're pretending to be teachers and a union. They're liars. Okay, I kept mentioning communism. So I think it's really important that we all understand that this is a communist route. If you don't believe me, that's okay, but go back and do some digging into your history. Because when you study other communist countries and communist goals, you will discover exactly the agenda that we're facing today, that the unions are pushing. So I'm going to show you just a few samples of, y'all know W. Cleon Skousen, or know of him? He wrote an amazing book called The Naked Communist. Skousen worked in the FBI in the 1950s, and he saw communist infiltration then, tried to warn us, wrote this book, The Naked Communist, and in that book he has the 45 goals of the Communist Party to undermine the American Free Republic, not to make you sick to your stomach, but they have accomplished 44 of the 45 goals. The only one they have not accomplished is, what's the first word they say? It's something like make the FBI look bad. It's not those words. Make them look bad and dismantle the FBI. They've made them look bad. They haven't dismantled them yet, which tells me we need to save the FBI and take it back to what it used to be. Anyway, they're very successful at these goals. Look at goal 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts of socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Put the party line in textbooks. And get control of the teachers' associations. They've done it. They've done it all. Why is this crazy sex ed in your kids' books? Because it's communism, and they accomplished this goal. Why are there crazy teachers out there teaching crazy things? Because this goal's been accomplished. And the good teachers, I want to tell you, the majority are good teachers. They have PTSD. They're retiring early in record number. They need you to stand with them. I hope more of them will stay and fight and abandon the unions. Here's just a couple more. Discredit the American Constitution, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography. If you can make people immoral, you can control them. Discredit the family as an institution. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Unbelievable. You see why I call it demonic? I can't think of any other word for this than demonic. Evil. Who would do this? Okay, so just very quickly, the average teacher pays $1,000 a year in dues to the so-called unions. I know teachers who pay $1,200 or more. This is average. This is easy math. My third graders could have done this math. So even the unions might be able to do this math. I don't know. But $1,000 a year, look how it's broken down. Most of it goes to the state and national unions. Teachers hate them. Their local gets change. Most teachers like their local because, you know, they're their friends standing with them, but it's all corrupt. Totally corrupt. And I was a union rep for 3 years. I saw it with my own eyes. Let's do the math. This is the number of teachers that are in the two major unions, NEA and AFT. If they're paying $1,000 a year, many pay more. Multiply that by the number of teachers, you come up with almost $5 billion with a B annually tax-free. That's how the left gets a lot of their money to destroy our republic. So that my homework for you, please help us get teachers to stop funding these unions. I took their case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I took the hits. I left my job afterwards. I don't have a paycheck anymore because I'm fighting for those teachers. Please help me. It's so hard to reach them. But if you know teachers and you put your arm around them and you adopt them and you teach them this stuff, and I wrote a book, so anything you need to teach them is in the book, and it's easy reading. So here's your homework. You can even take a picture of that QR code. It'll take you directly to our website if that's easy. The first two are your homework, adopt a teacher and union exit. What's adopt a teacher? It just means you put your arm around a teacher you know, educate them, and empower them to stop funding the union. They're going to be scared. Some of them are going to think the union's their friend and you're going to educate them. No, No, your union's the devil, or however they can hear it. And once they see the truth and you educate them, then help them to leave the union. And then once they've left, that's what Adopt a Teacher looks like. Once they've left the union, bring them back to our website to union exit. Union exit, step 1, answers all their questions because they're scared and they've been lied to so much. And you'll call me and you'll go, I don't know what to say. This is what she's worried about. I'll go, it's on the toolkit. It's on the toolkit. So step 1, they read the toolkit, answers all their questions. Step 2, they opt out of the union for free. It's all for free. Step 3, we show them how to get alternative liability insurance. The number 1 reason teachers won't leave the unions is they think they need the union's liability insurance. The unions make sure to sue people to scare them. This is better insurance for a fraction of the cost. So, and there's no politics. So that's your homework. Think of a teacher you know, or a government employee if you don't know a teacher. This is my book. I brought a few today if you want to buy one, to give to a teacher especially. Read for yourself, but also to give to a teacher because this will answer their questions. It's written very emotionally in a way that a teacher or a parent can. It's not a bunch of stats, and it's story of teachers and kids being abused. So please help us to rescue teachers, because if teachers reject unions and reject them in big number, we can save America. We just got to get these evil demons that are on the inside out, and teachers and government employees can do that. Thanks for letting me visit with you today.